Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another Wiser Wednesday. Good to have you here. So we've got an awesome panelist today. We're talking about how purpose powers your startup. I'm James Potten. Believe in a world of entrepreneurial success without burnout. As I always say, I've got the charred t-shirt to sort of show it. And today we're discussing purpose. And well, look, I mean, it's a tricky time. And there may be some, views out there as to, is purpose the thing that we need to be focusing on right now when the lowest run of Maslow, food, shelter, water is being threatened, and how do leaders handle that? And look, in my view, like purpose is a really interesting journey, and it's, there's only sort of 10 inches between your head and your heart, but it's the longest journey humans will go on. And I think that's something that hopefully comes through in our discussion today. And what would you do if your team was more aligned? What would happen? If you could put that into the comments, that would be brilliant. So look, I'm going to introduce the panelists. First up, Robbie, your policy director of Ecosurety. You do an amazing rendition of Blackbird. I unfortunately missed it the day that you came in with your guitar. Pretty sure you were topless too, based on the adoring fans you earned that day. But I've seen the video. It's very good. So maybe later, let's see if we've got any time at the end. We worked together, and look, I mean, it was a point when the business had been going maybe about it was about 6 years or something, and we hadn't really focused on purpose. And you joined at a time that you almost came with this kind of purpose matters. So I'm really excited to hear from you today. 11 years later, you still continue to drive the vision forwards. So welcome, Robbie. Isabel, welcome. You're founder of Purpose with Profit, and you've got a number of other strings to your bow. You learned to swim when you were 49. Surely that's a future birthday. You met the Dalai Lama twice. You chaperoned David Craig at the BAFTAs. You're also very early stage at Salesforce, I think employee number 4 in the UK, and you really drove their sort of impact policy globally. So welcome, Isabel. Really looking forward to hearing from you. Andy, founder of Business on Purpose. You're a trained beekeeper. You speak, and I'm going to try and pronounce this correctly. Is it Kelsey? Maybe? South African language. So it's brilliant. Maybe we can hear a bit in a bit. You set up a magical B Corp advisory, which we've actually been through your program, and it's a really cost-effective and enjoyable group way to try and go on that B Corp journey. So welcome, Andy. And finally, Nicole Gibson, so founder of Love Out Loud. You're author of the book of the same name. You're calling in for Australia today, so I think it's 10 p.m. for you. Welcome. Thanks for staying up. You're the youngest Commonwealth Commissioner in history. You left school at 14 to be a rock star and still want to be a rock star, so watch out, Robbie. You lived in the van for 2 years while facilitating over 1,500 workshops and 300 communities across rural Australia. So great to have you here, Nicole. So look, to set the mood, Bun Fight is a fun night. So if you want to join in, obviously try not to talk over each other, but respect that. But I love it when you can ask other questions if you want. No swearing, we're live, but passion is welcome. And let's start with some quick intros from each of you. So in less than a minute, I guess, Isabel, fire away.
Sure, it was Daniel Craig I chaperoned at the BAFTAs, not David.
What did I say?
David Craig, that's quite different.
It wasn't Craig David.
Yeah, Daniel Craig, yeah. Pre and post Bond. Anyway, I'm using up my time. So my background, I come from social impact, Oxfam, 11 years at Amnesty International, and I then went to Salesforce, as you mentioned, which was quite a leap, but it was a startup when I joined. I went to a party in San Francisco for the 300th employee. A couple of years after I joined. So I know people think of that as a massive monolithic company, but it was a startup. And that's when I started working with them on their social impact. I now sit on the board of a tech company that I've been with since it floated, TPX Impact, which is a purpose-driven company. So from startup to floating, and they're a purpose-driven company, and I chair the ESG committee. And then my own company, Profit with Purpose. I work with companies on their social impact strategy, so small companies, as well as large companies like Gucci and Experian, but the methodology is the same, and what companies need to do is the same.
Excellent. Okay. Thanks, Isabel. Robbie, you're next.
Yeah, so I suppose my potted highlights of my career is really started at IKEA. So a very huge organization. We'll probably get into a little bit more about their purpose later on. But what I find myself in a company that was absolutely massive, I kind of realized is that I wanted to kind of make a difference and scale things back. So I joined Ecosurety about 11 years ago now, just as it was coming out of that startup phase and wrestling with what it was like to be a sort of mid-sized business. And there were lots of growing pains back then. I started as an account manager, and then now I'm on the board, one of the directors of the company, and I've seen it grow from sort of 20 odd employees to 70 now. And also, you know, turnover go from 2 million to probably going to be in sort of 100 million plus, I should imagine, this year. So really seeing mega growth in the company, and yeah, looking forward to getting right into purpose, because it's something that sits front and center for me. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Robbie. Andy, you're next on my screen.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name's Andy Hawkins, based in Bristol. I grew up mainly in tech, but at age 40, we took a career break and headed out to Africa with the family. Instead of staying for a year, we stayed for 6 years and worked in a township just outside of Cape Town called Somerset. So we went from Devon to Somerset, but it was a 10,000-mile trip. And that was where I learned to speak Xhosa. So an X is a Q is a, and a C is a. So there was all sorts of clicks, which caused a lot of laughter and hilarity when we were speaking, especially as it was a white guy from England that was speaking it. A lot of my black friends just thought it was hilarious that I was having a go. So came back in 2010 and got back into tech subsequently in artificial intelligence software sales. Set up my own tech consultancy 2 years ago, put that through B Corp. Some friends reached out and asked me for help, and since then I've helped 200 clients on their B Corp journey. So that's me.
Awesome. Thanks, Andy. Nicole.
What a panel. Thank you, James. So my journey in purpose, I was an entrepreneur as soon as I could sign a contract, but definitely a very unconventional, I think, foundation, because the first 2 years of my entrepreneurial journey, I did, in fact, live in my van and travel to remote communities, delivering not just workshops, but really holding spaces where I was inviting communities to come into a place of vulnerability and truth. And it might not be so contextually easy for you guys to understand, but remote Australia was not, you know, the sort of warm environment that would welcome those sorts of conversations easily. So I definitely had to have a sense of purpose greater than me, especially in the early days, to pioneer those conversations. But through, I guess, the commitment of serving a purpose greater than myself, that I really did feel called to do, I recognize that the power that has to really affect change, and how one person really can be the beginnings of a massive ripple. And since then, yeah, I went on to work as the youngest Commonwealth Commissioner, advising the federal budget, working beside the Prime Minister to do so, because these interventions that I started out the back of my van did prove to be very cost effective. Go figure, really just loving each other and listening to one another. It is free. It's a lot more cost effective than a lot of the interventions they were exploring at the time. And recognized, you know, the power of love. I fell in love with looking at love as a system, compassion as a system, something that we can deconstruct and put into actionable processes within our systems. And so that's really what Love Out Loud and our tech arm, in truth, is dedicated to doing, systemizing love.
Amazing. Thanks. Well, really looking forward to hearing from you as well today, Nicole. So look, starting off, I guess, like, to you, Robbie, and we always used to joke about, you know, didn't you used to work for IKEA? He always wore the lanyard in every day around his neck. So that's but it kind of sparked us into like thinking, well, maybe this is actually important, because it was really important to you. So what's it like to work in a purpose-led organization?
Yeah, it's a sort of strange one, the IKEA background. So for those of you who obviously won't know my story, I effectively graduated, was looking for a job, had to go take a load of temporary jobs. I was posting flyers about gas works through people's front doors. I was waiting tables at black tie do's. I also took a job building furniture in an IKEA store, literally for their bargain corner, where they just mashed together all the broken stuff and tried to sell it on rather than putting it in the bin. And so that was where I started, whistled while I worked, just doing what I consider to be kind of Lego for adults. I know there is Lego for adults too, but that was how I viewed it. And when I was doing that, all sorts of opportunities opened up to me because I was doing something that had meaning and purpose. I did a geography degree, I'm a passionate environmentalist, and I was doing something that was preventing this furniture from being put into the bin. So while I whistled while I worked, while other colleagues smirked and thought, this guy's got a degree, he's gone to university for 3 years and in however much debt, yet he's here singing while he's working, building furniture. They sort of just thought I was the oddball. And I think ultimately the reason was because I had some purpose and some meaning to my life and could see tangibly that instead of a great big skip of material going to landfill, we had products being sold and people taking them home to enjoy. IKEA's vision, which I think has been sort of around since year dot, I know it must be 20, 30 years old, is to create a better everyday life for the many people. It's ingrained in my mind. And that's because I was walking along thinking, I'm creating a better everyday life for the many people. Now, some of those in the kitchen area or the bathrooms area were thinking, I'm giving people nice bathrooms and that's making their life better. I didn't think like that. The purpose was so universal that I was thinking, the way I'm making everyone's life better is by us not having waste piling up in landfill sites and having to be burnt and leading to, climate change, etc. So it's so strange that a furniture company, a huge, massive organization like that could possibly drive an environmentalist to think, hey, this is the right place for me for now. Eventually, I continued with my career journey at IKEA. I moved to a different store. I became what was called their sustainability specialist. I started to give training on trying energy saving within the store so that we used less energy. I started putting balers into many of the different stores so that we could start to bale cardboard and plastics and sell them on so it could be recycled and become a value rather than a cost to the organization. So through my journey there, even though my colleagues then, when I moved on to Ecosurety, laughed about the lanyard, was I was proud to have worked there because of the work that I did. And unfortunately, I had to leave eventually to continue my journey. We can talk a little bit about Ecosurety's purpose too. And the reason for that was the next stage in my career journey at IKEA was to go and start selling kitchens and be the manager of the kitchens department. I wasn't there to sell kitchens. I was there to make a better everyday life for the many people. But the way that I was doing that didn't match with the job roles that were on offer. So I left that organization and I moved on to Ecosurety.
Yeah, so it's super interesting, Robbie. It's like there's like a unifying message at the top that means something different to different people within the organization. Isabel, have you got thoughts on this? Because I know your business is called Purpose, has purpose and profit in the title, right? So
profit with purpose. That way.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I think this is a really interesting panel because it actually brings together or is representative of the different entry points to purpose. So through, compassion and caring and love, and then through sort of being part of something bigger than yourself, which Nicole spoke about, but then also through the work that Andy does, so through certification, and then, some of what Robbie does, sort of metrics and compliance. There are all these different entry points. Everyone lands in that middle ground of, we want to be a more purposeful business. Those, being profitable and being purposeful are not mutually exclusive. People come to it from different points, but the sort of stopping point for a lot of SMEs or startups is, how do we actually do this? What do we actually do to act on what I either care about or what I feel I need to do to be compliant. You know, and I think that's, and we know that profitability does come from being purposeful. It means that employees come and work for you because you align with their values and you treat them well. You know, that's on the caring side, but it also means that you attract customers who've got values that align with yours, and you can see that you know, you're buying from a company, a well-run company that aligns with your values, probably sort of like IKEA. And then one of the things that struck me when I joined TPX Impact, the founder, Neil Gandhi, is a serial entrepreneur, and he was starting tech companies. They were kind of quite hard-nosed companies by his own sort of admission. And when he started thinking about the purpose of the companies he was starting, he said those were the easiest companies that I'd started because there was a clarity of direction, that everyone was looking in the same direction. Everyone knew what it was that they were trying to achieve, where we were going, and that enabled us all to go along in that same direction and grow more quickly and be more quickly successful. Yeah. So I think I'll stop there, but those are sort of thoughts from what I've heard so far.
Yeah, no, amazing. Yeah, and that sort of, you know, the concept of getting everyone on the bus, the right people on the bus, right people on the seats on the bus, but also everyone like looking in the same direction. Like, you know, it's actually really hard to do. All of, you know, sounds easy about getting people on the bus, but it's really hard to do in an organization. Nicole, do you have any sort of thoughts on? You're leading a very purposeful business now. You know, what does that feel like?
What does it feel like? 1,000 different things a day. I think. You know, I find I'm specifically very passionate about team alignment. Part of the technology we're developing is creating pathway of communication between the conscious and subconscious mind to measure belief systems in an accurate way. And so one of the really clear use cases for us is supporting organizations to actually measure the internal congruence and alignment of team members against things like values, KPIs, the vision of the company. And what so many people don't realize, and what we make a point at Love Out Loud in talking a lot about and doing a lot of development in, is 90% of us is subconscious. So when, you know, a large team of people start to form, there might be this conscious sort of agreement that, yeah, we're on the same page, we believe in the same things, but these are, you know, potentially thousands, tens of thousands of individuals that have different life experiences with conflicting belief systems, and getting those aspects, those unknown aspects of us all on the same page so that we can really, I guess, leverage the true potential of having a collective team moving in the one direction. It's a very deep conversation. I mean, how deep do you want to go down the rabbit hole? I think
well, I wrote down Young. I remember, I think he talked about the cork bobbing on the ocean. The cork is your conscious and the ocean is the subconscious. So yeah, I wrote down archetypes. It could be a very different conversation. It might be a fireside chat, but I actually believe that this is all relevant. And it's, yeah, like, but and it's amazing because you're creating a team of people that all believe in this and want to make a change as a result. So yeah, let's get into it a bit, maybe a little bit later. Let's Andy, what's your thoughts? You said you've got helped 200 companies now. You know, what do you see? What sort of transition do you see? We're on that journey. We're not there yet, but you know, it's really helped us in our thinking. So far away. Oh, you're on mute.
Yeah, first of all, for me personally, you know, I feel absolutely in my sweet spot right now. You know, I feel like I'm doing what I was created to do. I'm in my ikigai. If you've come across ikigai, I'm in the middle of my ikigai, and feel very privileged to be doing something that the world wants and I can get paid for and is within my skill set. So it all feels great. What's also great is helping other businesses move towards, you know, their sweet spot in terms of what makes them feel happy and what makes them feel as if they're making a contribution to the world, not just from a financial perspective and we've got a certain number of employees and therefore we're creating jobs, but we're doing that in a way that is impactful and supports those people in a wide range of different metrics and supports the planet and is not extractive, but is hopefully moving towards a circular economy. And a lot of businesses have just frankly never thought about it before. I speak to hundreds of people, and one of my first questions is, do you think you run an ethical business? And of course they all say, you know, to a person, yes, of course I do. Cheeky thing. And then when I say, well, how do you know that you run an ethical business? How do you measure what you're doing in terms of people and planet, and how do you compare with your peers? At that stage, those same people generally start to stutter and say, well, I don't really know the answer to that in truth. And therefore helping them go through the B impact assessment, when a cheeky chappy comes along subsequently and asks them that question, they can say, well, this is what I'm doing to measure it, and this is how I know this, and this is how I know that. And it's a great way of answering that specifically. And more than anything else, the one word that comes out at the end of the program when we take people through the impact assessment is educational. They find that it's been a hugely educational business, and the majority of them are all very kind of purposeful businesses, good people at the beginning of the journey. We're not taking, you know, a dreadful, horrible company or person through the process. They're all good people, but they've all learned huge amounts when they've gone through that impact assessment. I know, Robbie at Ecosurety, you know, you said, you know, you're 70% good, and you've kind of just learned other things to kind of bolt on around the side and help yourself become better. And that's really what we're trying to do, is help businesses to become better, fitter, stronger, healthier, and more purposeful.
Amazing. Thanks, Andy. Isabel.
I chip in there on the back of that, because it's so perfect. To a point that I quite often say to clients is that you need to start with the strategy, not the tactics. So a lot of companies start, you know, no one starts a company thinking they want to maximize profit. Everyone starts a company because they think that they're doing something that serves a purpose for people or the planet. But they never articulate what that purpose is. And then they get focused on the profit, and then they go and add like a volunteer program or something. And that volunteer program is never going to really work unless you know why you're doing it. So where I often start with clients is like to articulate what their North Star is. So that is their objective for the company, which is what they want to do to make profit, but also how it encompasses their purpose. And then everything flows from that. And I find, sort of like Andy's saying, with business owners, they probably have already thought of it, but they've never articulated it. And it is an education and a relief often when they end up with this articulated North Star that everyone can align to, and then they can deliver with metrics and KPIs, and helps them to be a more rounded, purposeful business. It's just they articulate that on the revenue side, not on the purpose side.
Great, yeah. It kind of leads in, Isabel, to the next part of this, which is, it's not like the news, you know, CNN's constantly negative news. It's not like we don't live in this sort of fear state anyway if you allow news into your life, but you know, there's certainly it's becoming a more bleak message. So what can you, like, that has a potential to push business owners towards focusing on, you know, profitability, and maybe forgetting about like some of the pledges or the values, like things drop as a result of fear. What would you say to those businesses?
To me? Oh, well, it's the opposite. That people, you know, companies need to find what's going to differentiate them for employees and for customers. And I think people increasingly want to work with companies that clearly align with their values. And one of the clients I'm working with at the moment, that's a small company doing its B Corp application at the moment, they're in Bristol, well, like Andy is. This is part of their post-pandemic recovery, which is, you know, it's really clear that they're coming back to profitability, but the next stage of that and to consolidate that is to really hone down what their purpose beyond profit is, what they're offering to their customers and their employees are. And, you know, that's come from the CEO having spent more time at home during the pandemic, of his business nearly collapsing, and him coming back out fighting, thinking, how do we make this right? And their business has some clear adjacencies to climate change and community development, and he's determined that that's going to be part of their offering going forward. So it's a really clear, you know, for me, it's a really clear winner. And a time when people are suffering, you need to think around you of what can we do to help benefit others. And not just, you know, how do you make profit? You've got resources as a company that you can apply without being expensive, to support the world and other people.
Great. Nicole, what are your thoughts with this? You know, your very like purpose of your business is to shift from fear to love. What advice would you give?
It was interesting because we definitely experienced a growth phase at the beginning of the pandemic, and, you know, to deconstruct that, I do believe it was because what we were leading with was quite a relevant message that served a lot of value. And although we had been, you know, speaking to that message for many years prior, at that particular time, because the world was so struck by fear and uncertainty and anxiety, there was I think an amplified need for that message. And what that speaks to is Isabel's point, you know, when you're focused on that as a business, what is the true problem we're solving every day, and how does that have contextual relevance to what's happening globally, happening in the lives of individuals? There's always going to be a business model in that. And I think, you know, especially for startup founders and teams, as hard as it is, seeing these times as opportunity and having that hunger, you know, that Isabel was referring to in the CEO example, is so important. You know, that there's adversity right now that we can grow through. Some of the biggest companies in the world were built during recession. And I think it's the nature of an entrepreneur to turn adversity and challenge into opportunity. And so flipping that on its head, and when the whole world is seeing fear, how can you see love? How can you see opportunity? How can you see invitation to extend yourself, to serve in a way that you've never served before? And that really, you know, is the biggest unique selling point, I think, of any company, is that courage, that bravery, especially as our consumer behavior shifts as a world. I think people are becoming more conscious of what they support, and it is based on value. And one of the things we do within Love Out Loud as a community and movement is study a lot about the nature of developing communities and what communities of the future are going to look like. And this has already been the case, but I think it will become even more the case as we move more into things like Web3, so on, that organizations and their subsequent consumers are going to be the tribes, the communities of the future. So looking at how to serve them is, I think, paramount. And, you know, you probably, you know, I don't think you're going to survive as a company unless you start asking these questions.
Yeah. Okay. No. Brilliant. Yeah. I mean, it's another discussion around, you know, Web3 and where everything's going as well. Maybe we look at some trends towards the end. Robbie, do you have thoughts on this? You're probably seeing, data, you know, potentially data on like what cost of living impact and so on. Have you got thoughts on this at the moment? You advise government as well on this piece?
Yeah, we're certainly seeing belt tightening. You know, our customers are FMCG companies, and, you know, some of those are sort of necessities, and some of those are luxury goods that people cut down on. And so, you know, recession has an impact, sometimes positively, sometimes negatively. I think from the government standpoint also, you know, that they're trying to continue with growth, you know, so in that context, it's easy to start sort of wondering, where's it all heading? But I think,
it's a contradiction almost, yeah,
totally. But to quote the great philosopher Yoda, fear is the path to the dark side. Because ultimately, if your company is ruled by fear of failure, ruled by fear that their economic conditions are not right for you to succeed, ruled by the fear that purpose is something that you get at the top of Maslow's and not something that you need to start thinking about at the beginning when you start your business, then ultimately you are on the path to the dark side. And I think really that is the fundamental thing. And so when you're thinking about growing your business, regardless of the economic conditions, you need to be thinking about, how do I put good teams in place and retain those people? Because I was lucky enough to work in a company a few different times where the purpose was given to me. I'm also very fortunate now that I can help to build the purpose and drive it. But there was a time when the purpose was just sort of bestowed upon me, and it either matched my values or it didn't. And what that meant is it gave meaning to the inordinate amount of time that I spent in work. It put a smile on my face. The days went fast. I wanted to go to work. These are things that people are going to want, regardless of whether their backs are to the wall and they're just trying to make ends meet to put a roof over their head or not. So sometimes that Maslow's hierarchy is actually quite unhelpful in thinking about, you got to lock down these things before you move on to the next stage. The theory is true, but when it comes to starting a business, if you're not putting why bother at the beginning, then you may as well shut up shop now.
Yeah, great, thanks. Yeah, completely agree, Robbie. And Andy, you're welcome to sort of comment on where we're at, but also look, what can leaders do? What are some of the pathways that leaders could take to go on a more purposeful journey?
Well, another well-known philosopher is our friend Simon Sinek, and his Start With Why, and that's a good place to start. I think that's the case. And I've been watching SAS Rogue Heroes, and they've just got to Who Dares Wins when they came up with their motto. And I guess that's the opposite of fear is the pathway to the darkness. So I think I'm an eternal optimist. I love to believe in hope. I love to believe in love. I love to believe in doing the right thing. And I believe that is intrinsic within all of us as humans ultimately. And even though when you listen to your CNN and other news feeds are available, you wouldn't necessarily believe it, but I do believe that that's in all of us. And doing that within a business is a great thing to do. So a lot of businesses that I spoke to that were, post-Brexit, post-COVID, wanting to build back better. There was a lot of noise around, build back better, and we want to do this. And people had been off during COVID and had an epiphany or a degree of introspection on what life was all about. But a lot of them I spoke to didn't necessarily then know, well, what are some practical steps that I can now take to move myself in that more purposeful direction? And I think that the B Impact Assessment is just a great framework tool. It's a free framework that anyone can work through, see where they're at, celebrate the successes, spot the gaps, do something to improve those gaps and become more robust, and measure and mitigate and manage that risk, and just make themselves a better, fitter, stronger, healthier company. So that as a toolkit is just a really practical way of helping people to improve, and it's something that's available to businesses of any size. The largest business I've worked with has been several billion, 10,000 people strong, right the way down to the smallest, which has been pre-startup, single person, pre-startup. Here's an idea. This is something that I've got an idea about. How do I actually move that forward? And for them, going through the impact assessment really does start to fill out some of the gaps in terms of the direction of travel they want to go in, and how they get there in a meaningful and purposeful way. So that as a practical toolkit has been a really simple and effective thing to use.
Can I add something on that? Yeah. Just that startups are so well positioned to do that, because you can do it from the outset. So to, like, you know, what Robbie said, so Salesforce did it from the outset. That was part of the whole proposition of Salesforce. It was a move to the cloud, a new type of technology. And what Mark Benioff said was a new type of philanthropy, so embedded in the company from the very outset. And that's now, what, $150 billion company. So it did them no harm to do that from the outset and to commit. They do the 1%. So what they used to 1% of pre-IPO equity, 1% of time, and 1% of product, which really sort of it works for the B Corp as well. It sort of really resonates with people to put a tangible, what do I do? You know, so think about giving 1% of things that you've got from the outset, and that grows then as you grow. And then my other thing, it's sort of on the collaboration thing, is, you know, when you do it in your business, don't wait until you've made your first million or billion, but also don't do that, my most hated phrase of giving back or give back, because you shouldn't be taking it in the first place if you need to give it back. And really, you should always be thinking about partnership and collaboration the whole way through, not make the money and then do something to make up for it afterwards. And startups are the best positioned companies to do that.
Yeah.
Thanks as well. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. But it does depend on where someone is on their journey, but you have to sometimes meet people where they're at, don't you? And it's a really difficult, I've come up against this, you know, work with business leaders of like quite small like businesses around sort of 3 to 5 people, you know, maybe $250,000 turnover or whatever. And sometimes I secretly, once they're on the program with me, the second lesson is about getting your North Star, getting your vision, like seeing if you can align to UN SDGs. I had to sort of take it out of some of my marketing at the front because it didn't always resonate with people. And it's kind of like disappointing, but at the same time, yeah, I sort of feel that they soon understand why I think it's so important. And look, you know, why Robbie's the journey Robin and I went on is like, this really works. Now like $100 million turnover business that wouldn't have got there without a purpose. So, but it's really hard. Robbie, yeah, far away.
Yeah, well, I think just coming in on that, it's talking about the impact that it then had on the customer. Because ultimately, yes, it did help us retain great people. Yes, it did bind a team together in a common vision and purpose, and to get going on the journey and to love being in the trenches together, so to speak. But actually, what happened is when we turned it out externally and say, look, the reason we're here talking to you today is because we're trying to passionately protect the environment. We'll probably sell you some stuff that help to do that thing or comply with a pretty mundane and boring law that the government put in that's very complicated and frustrating for you to sort of get your head around. But if you start with it's a headache, all of this stuff, trying to count the beans is really tough in environmental legislation terms, you're not actually going to sell anything to anyone, because it's like you're trying to create the problem to then solve the problem, rather than walk in with a much more open-hearted approach that is, this is why we bother to get up in the morning. This is why I've, sat on a train for 4 hours to get halfway across the country to come and have this hour-long meeting with new prospective client. Because as soon as you start talking about why you're there, and coming back to Andy's comments about Simon Sinek's golden circle, then it totally changes the interaction that you have with the customer. And I think and that's why that purpose is so important, is that lots of it is trying to, lots of people try to focus too much on specificity, and they try and make it like an elevator pitch or something that perfectly describes their business or what they do, or bits of how they do what they do. And they don't really think, why are they bothering to do that thing? So quite often when I'm having these discussions externally, you know, in advisory capacities with other people, I notice that there is this tendency that they don't go for the sort of universality of the English language, where you can start to convey something that everyone can attach something onto. You know, they can find their own meaning in it, whether it be clients or whether it be your employees, or whether it be yourself internally, what it means to you. So I think I wouldn't put too much pressure on you know, the SDGs and all these kind of external factors, but rather think about, how can I be authentic to create this statement that's the reason that I then go on and do these things. And definitely agree with Andy that Simon Sinek's Golden Circles is a great place to start with it as sort of, you know, 101. That's what we did, James. I remember you showing it to me all those years, many years ago, and it genuinely was the starting point of totally transforming and growing a business.
Yeah, we did come up against the we knew where we wanted to be, but we came up against some incongruence early on. So it was interesting, but we moved to where we wanted to be. We set the vision, we knew we were here, and then we shifted. So that's quite interesting, because it doesn't make, you know, it's a journey. You set out at a point and you're trying to get, you know. Nicole, is that something that you know, when you work with people, how do you help people on the journey? And to some extent, how do you meet them where they're at with what you do?
Yeah, I mean, there's some basic principles, right? And the first is we're only ever making two choices, which I think we've all alluded to in our own way: love or fear. And so, because I think, you know, especially in the startup journey, building a team, growing a mission, all of the decisions you need to make, you know, it's easy, I think, to get lost in amongst the tens of thousands of decisions that are being made. Bringing it back to, you know, just that gives this clarity and this pathway of, are you expansive? Are you unified? Are you creative, altruistic, all these kind of symptoms of love and openness? Or are you contracted, judgmental? Is there division within your team? You know, are you limiting the possibility that's actually here through your thinking? So I think that foundational awareness is really important, because I think especially the startup environment, like, it was shocking for me to meet that community for the first time and realize, wow, these dudes are actually the most sort of cynical and fearful, and yet they're the ones meant to be driving, you know, the future of innovation. And most of them are citing these stats around 9 out of 10 startups fail, and this and that, when we can be adopting this mindset of, well, we're on a journey, you know, and part of the journey is to learn how to equip ourselves effectively for that journey, to be agile, flexible, you know, able to pivot and innovate where necessary, identify, you know, where there's going to be limitations and blocks, and work through that, because that's a part of the growth. I think you can't fake a willingness. I really do. Like, my work with people has taught me again and again, that's the one thing you really can't teach people. You can't teach them to be willing. And I think in the long run, the founders, the teams that are going to really make it past the threshold of those challenges are the ones that have a true sense of willingness to be on that journey. And it is intrinsic. I think there's so much personal development. When I've led trainings, one of the things I'll always say is there's really no such thing as professional development. There's just personal development in a professional context, because it comes back to who you are as a person, how you respond to situations, how you embrace what's in front of you when it's uncomfortable, when it is hard, you know, when there's a conflict. Who are you in those moments? What excites me on a personal level is who I get to become. And I think that that's, in my case, and the founders that I feel share that same drive, that we're driven fundamentally by who we get to become on the journey, and everything else is an overflow of that. Sharing becomes natural with your team, and I think modeling becomes natural when you have that beginner's mindset, but you're also kind of visionary, you're willing to be wrong, but you're also, you know, clear and decisive because you know who you are. There's a beautiful sweet spot in that I would love to see more business owners embrace in a culture that I think is becoming more and more and more obsessed with being right. We lose so much in the process of adopting that kind of culture.
Yeah, no, that's amazing. It reminds me of you know, say you don't have business problems, you have personal problems showing up in your business. You know, it's that type of thing. You need to like look after yourself. You know, you know what you put into your body, like the fitness, whatever, all those sorts of things. It really matters. You know, it's all part of the journey. Is there almost? I've never seen it so. I saw it really starkly. I went out to Togo with a charity called Deki, and we saw like the impact of the sort of the patriarchy, and basically Deki tries to get the money into the hands of the mothers because they spend the money on the kids, and the fathers may not if they have like a number of kids. So it's but you know, it mirrors our society. So how do you? It's almost a more like bringing a more feminine like mindset into business. How do we? You know, that's hell of a journey, isn't it, to go on?
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, though, you know, if you see it through the frame of masculine and feminine, it's just a model that communicates balance. Ultimately, like in an Eastern culture, it'll be referred to as, you know, yin and yang. But I think that the true message in the middle of that is centeredness, balance, and that comes back to the virtue, I think, of knowing yourself, because there's a time for masculinity, there's a time for deep assertiveness, decisiveness, conviction, you know, that killer instinct that's going to drive forward. If a company is void of that, it's not going to progress. But when there's an imbalance, and then that's the only energy driving the car, or, you know, the ship, and there isn't patience and compassion and space and inclusivity, then, you know, the business is going to have some issues, and so is the effect it has on the world. But balance, I mean, it's the most cliche thing to say. We have to achieve balance internally first. And there's way too many instances where you see CEOs, high-performing C-suite execs, founders, who are just so not balanced internally. Like when I was on the commission, it really used to blow my mind that I would often be sitting in boardrooms with people that were responsible for the distribution of billions of dollars that affected tens of millions of Australians. And they were in artificial light 16 hours a day, slept 2 hours a night, you know, drinking coffee all day, processed sugars. And just, you know, like I'm a bit of a fanatic about my routine and health and my inner peace and centeredness. So I used to look at this and just be like, there's no way, just on a physiological level, you're going to be able to make balanced decisions. You're not balanced. So, you know, what you create is where you create from. That internal state, I think is number one. And I would say to any person that feels they have a big mission to serve on the planet, go on that journey first. I think what was really special about my experience early on in my entrepreneurial journey is I really, in many ways, kind of let go of everything material. I owned a $3,000 van and a couple of pairs of clothes, and my focus every day was serving. And so I came out of that realizing that nothing else really is the core, you know. It's not that nothing else matters, but everything else is an extension of finding what's really true, that thing you would do for free, you know, that thing you would do because it brings you the most joy. When you find that sweet spot, you will, I believe, achieve huge amounts of prosperity and abundance if you see it through and you remain committed and devoted, and you'll bring an amazing team, no doubt, on that journey with you. But that's a byproduct of finding that inner state.
Yeah. Okay, amazing. Yeah. Does anyone want to jump in with any thoughts on the back of that?
I think it's, you kind of said it earlier, it's about meeting people where they are on that journey. And for us, when we go to meet a new client, you know, you do quickly assess whether you're going to put your kind of profit foot forward or your purpose foot forward first, and ease them into, you know, that. And I think with some of the business leaders we've worked with in, you know, more traditional, larger companies, there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of fear of, you know, your stock price going down because you're doing something that others in your sector are not doing, that you're putting your head above the parapet. There's fear of something new coming into your business that you don't know about, and that you're not equipped to sort of really deal with. And I think then that's our approach as consultants, is to have compassion for that, really, rather than, you know, I think a lot of people think when you're coming in to do consulting around purpose that there's going to be a lot of finger pointing, and there's none of that. It's, let's find out where you are, let's make you understand this and make you look good. You know, that is our greatest task as a consultant, is to help people to do their best work and make them look good. And you know, if we can do that kindly, with compassion, education, all the things we've been talking about, then that will come through as being authentic, and it will actually get implemented and be meaningful for that company, rather than, you know, we had that bit of consulting done on the side and it never gets implemented.
Yeah. Amazing. Andy, do you have any thoughts on how leaders can involve their team in, you know, working or trying to, you know, delve into what the purpose could be within their organization?
Yeah, I think you know, being a leader and leading from the front to a certain extent, and leading by example is a great way of doing it. But I also think fundamentally that the best way of being a leader is to ultimately be a servant leader. And you know, your main priority and your main focus is to serve those around you, to serve your community, to serve your company, not be the big I am and expect everyone else to follow. And there are, you know, many examples of the world's best leaders being servant leaders. So that would be the position that I'd try and adopt, or encourage people to adopt, is one of humility and one of learning from and engaging with the rest of their team. I think what Nicole said, you know, you need to do that from a position where you've got that to a certain extent sorted yourself. I don't think any of us have ever truly cracked it and have ever truly arrived at where we really need to be, which is an encouraging thing, because there's always more that we can be doing, which is a great thing to strive for. But I think you know, having that place of balance is where you need to go. And as a leader, you need to live that and be, you know, the most bright shining example of that, and then encourage others to do likewise. But doing it from a position of serving and loving and caring is the right place to come from.
Brilliant. Thanks, Andy. Robbie, have you got any thoughts on how to develop it?
Yeah, I was pondering that, sort of trying to think back what another Star Wars reference, what Jedi mind tricks you used on me once, James, because it was something that you engaged me in. You know, I remember being that employee who was like a year or two into their career, sort of knew what I was about and why I was happy and what career I was marching in. But then when you turned around to me and you asked me, why are you here? Why do you bother working for this company? What brought you to work today? What's important to you? What do you like about this mission? What do you even think the mission is? As soon as you started asking me those questions, it was mega orcs, I can tell you that. It was like, I mean, I'm not sure I'm able to. You want me to shoot from the hip on those, James? Give me a little bit of time. But actually, once provoked, even someone as relatively junior in the company as I was at that time, 8-9 years ago, I was sort of, one rung up from a graduate job, effectively, really. Being provoked to think about it was all that it took. And then suddenly, I'm hearing from the founders, the co-founders, yourself and Steve, you're giving feedback saying, hey, Robbie's helping to drive the mission forward. I'm like, am I? I mean, he just asked me a couple of questions and I said, this is why I bother turning up. And to put it simply, so all of that is sometimes a little bit intangible, those conversations. To put it simply, you could have turned up to work to count the beans of environmental compliance. You could have thought that basically your job is to be an accountant for environmental stuff. If I'd have wanted to be an accountant, I would have gone and become an accountant. I was there because the whole purpose of the industry was to increase the amount of recycling that happens in the UK. Very simple, actually quite humble, because we're not going to recycle our way out of all of the world's problems. But for what it was worth, that was why I bothered to turn up. And it was the same mission that I had when I was at IKEA. So my advice to the founder, if you have a team already around you, or you have advisors around you, if you're a sole employee at the moment, ask the question, why are we doing this? And you'll be really surprised with some of the results and the feedback you get, because it isn't something that you just create on your own and say, we're going over here, guys. Anyone want to come with me? It's not as simple as that, even in the early stages when there's very few employees.
Awesome. Thanks, Robbie.
Something on compliance. I'm just going to play the devil's advocate here, but it serves me well sometimes saying this to people. They actually don't have to care. There's increasing compliance coming. There's, if that's your starting point, but also things like the social value portal here in the UK, and the national TOMs, where you have to do this stuff in order to win work, increasingly with the public sector. So in that context, I don't care if you care, you have to do it. Similarly with environmental reporting, less so on the social side, you have to do it. So if that's your starting point, if that gets you to the place of incorporating this into your company and the core of what you do, fine. Probably along the way you will start to care, but in some ways you no longer need to. Awesome. Just to play the devil's advocate.
Yeah, no, look, it's exactly right. So it's weird. It's about setting like a stake out in the sand, and then it takes on a life of its own. The key thing is it's trying to, it's almost asking the question is the starting point. It's just start with a question. So, which leads us on to the final bit, because we've got to wrap up. So my final question to each of you is, what advice would you give to a startup leader in less than 20 words on how to begin their purposeful journey? Start with Andy, fire away.
I get them to go through the B impact assessment.
Perfect. Robbie.
Google The Golden Circle by Simon Sinek, and then ask the people around you why they're turning up to work.
Awesome. Thank you. Isabel.
Set your North Star, set some metrics, and then celebrate progress through your metrics towards your North Star.
Awesome. Thanks, Isabel. Nicole.
Your purpose, you don't find your purpose finds you. And focus more on surrendering than gaining.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Okay, look, so there you have it. Purpose helps magnetize great people to want to join your cause. And it doesn't hinder growth, it drives it. So fear is the path to the dark side. Great quote. There's a few in here today. And look, I hope you enjoy it. enjoyed it as much as I have. There's so many layers to this. It's probably something that's worth, listening to or watching back a couple of times. And it's always the journey of 1,000 miles is the first step. So just begin the journey and start the discussion within your team. Next Wednesday will be on how to make next year the best yet. So tune in. I'm sure these guys are all happy for you to reach out via LinkedIn or if you want to get in touch. Thank you so much to the panelists today. Thank you to everyone for listening. Hope you feel slightly wiser this Wednesday. Thank you. And thank you, everyone. Cheers.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Yeah.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.